Yeah, I think we are live.
1 minute, sir. We'll check it.
I can see on YouTube we are live. Okay.
Yeah, then we can go, sir. Yeah, we are live, sir.
Greetings and welcome to the 47th webinar of Anekdhara. Today's theme, as all of you are aware, is perspectives on eradicating extreme poverty in Kerala. Today, the discussion will be moderated by a young public policy professional, Mr. Raunaq Chandrashekar. So Raunaq Chandrashekar is an independent researcher and consultant in Mumbai. He obtained his law degree from National Law University, Delhi, and an MA from Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, specializing in international resource policy and human security. He has worked with the former MP, Professor Rajiv Gowda, Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, International Innovation Course at the University of Chicago, and the Boer Group Asia. He is a generalist and has worked on cross-sectoral issues in climate and energy policy, judicial reforms, technology policy, public health, resource management, and more. And his background is rooted in law, public policy, and geopolitics. So we have a moderator here. Over to you, Rona.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. And good morning and welcome to another edition of Anekdhara. As mentioned, my name is Raunaq Chandrashekar, and I'll be moderating today's discussion, which features two prominent veteran political economists who will share their perspectives on eradicating extreme poverty in the state of Kerala. The way this webinar will be structured is that I'll begin with a quick overview of the context and the issues, followed by introducing our first speaker who will present their views, and then our second speaker who will present theirs. To our viewers this morning, please feel free to share your thoughts, particularly your questions in the comment section, and our speakers will address them at the end during the Q&A section. If your question is specifically directed to any one of our two speakers, please remember to mention that in your comment as well. Now, for a little background, on 1st November 2025, the government of Kerala, led by Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan and the Communist Party of India Marxist, declared that the state had eradicated extreme poverty. It was a bold claim and drew considerable praise as well as questions from around the world, from journalists, from economists, politicians, and citizens. Kerala had long been a model for sustained efforts in addressing key socio-economic and welfare concerns for its constituents, and its commitment to focus on human development indicators has long been lauded. It has had several ambitious policies to address poverty over the past decades, including notably the Destitute Free Kerala policy that was instituted in 2002, which saw the percentage of its population facing extreme poverty reduce considerably over the last couple of decades. In 2021, the newly elected coalition government decided to reinforce these efforts with the announcement of the Extreme Poverty Eradication Project, the EPEP, which specifically focused on multidimensional poverty. They sought to address four key aspects of multidimensional poverty, which was the access to food and nutrition, to shelter and housing, basic income, and healthcare. The government made significant targeted efforts to survey and identify families across the state facing this form of multidimensional extreme poverty and focused on creating micro solutions that would be tailored to these families to lift them out of poverty. Now, since the announcement, there have been several voices critical of this claim as well. For instance, some ground reporting by news organizations have shown that historically marginalized communities, particularly tribal communities in regions such as Wayanad, have not benefited from this policy and still face extreme poverty, therefore indicating a potential disproportionate impact of this program. Political opposition leaders, such as legislators from the Bharatiya Janata Party, have suggested that credit, if any, should be attributed to the union government policies which the state has leveraged in the realm of poverty alleviation. On the other hand, many experts have also lauded this policy for its steadfast and holistic approach, emphasizing public investment which prioritizes inclusive development that goes beyond growth-centric approaches which traditionally prioritize GDP growth and often yield greater wealth disparity in a region. They say that the policy needs to be contextualized as a dynamic, ongoing project and not something static. So therefore, while shortcomings and tall political claims are par for course with these kind of ambitious policies, there is certainly plenty to analyze and learn from it. As citizens, it is vital for us to objectively assess this policy, its successes and its failures, and determine how best to address its shortcoming, build on it, and potentially replicate these successes in other parts of the country. We therefore look to our two esteemed panelists for this session to shed some light on this program, how it was operationalized, and what we must consider looking forward. So with that said, I would like to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Venkatesh Athreya. Dr. Athreya did his BTech in Chemical Engineering from IIT Madras, followed by an MSc and PhD in Economics from the University of Wisconsin at Madison in USA. He was previously the head of the Department of Economics at Bharatidasan University in Trichy, and is presently an adjunct professor at the Asian College of Journalism in Chennai and an honorary professor at the Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation in Thiruvananthapuram. Dr. Athreya focuses on economic theory, the Indian economy, and economic development, and has taught numerous courses for over 4 decades now. He has written over 100 published research papers, reports, monographs, and has been involved with the publication of 5 books. Beyond senior academic and administrative positions with universities, he has also engaged with the public sector and international organizations, serving on expert committees constituted by both the union and state governments, as well as the United Nations, and was the executive member of the National Literacy Mission. He was honored with the Distinguished Achievement Award for Political Economy in the 21st Century by the World Association of Political Economy in 2014. I'll now hand it over to Dr. Athreya to share his remarks. Thank you, Dr. Athreya, for joining us today. Dr. Athreya, you're muted at the moment.
Yeah. No, do I have a choice? I think Pulapre should go first. He's there from Kerala, and I would love to hear him before I get into it. Is that possible? I know you have a plan, but if Pulapre is agreeable.
Venkatesh, I think actually the organizers and I spoke about it, and I was strongly of the view that the most senior among us should speak first. But so I think I'm not going to hold down on this, but let me put it this way: I'll go by what you and the organizers decide.
Okay.
I'm not going to insist one way or the other.
Doesn't matter. I feel more comfortable hearing you out first before sharing my much more limited knowledge of Kerala. So that's what I had in mind. But I leave it to you. I mean, I'm okay either way.
Raunaq, I'll leave it to you. You can decide. You can take that call. I'll go either way.
Take the call. Yeah.
I believe Dr. Balakrishnan also has slides to show eventually. So perhaps, I don't know if we need some time to load those as well. So perhaps we could start with the order as was decided, if that's all right with you, Dr. Athreya.
Well, I don't see that I have much of a choice. No, because I had hoped to hear fully what Pulapre had to say, because he would know much more about the scheme being there and having been participating in Kerala's development. Anyway, I think that I need to make a few points. I think that this whole question of poverty is problematic in terms of definition. There's always a subjective element to the definition of poverty. We have to keep this in mind. Claims of the government apart, inherently the problem is not very straightforward. Right? Can anyone claim that they've done this or they've done that vis-a-vis poverty? It's always a problematic claim. But I think given the current context in this country, something like this is heartening news. Whatever its limitations, it's heartening because we now unfortunately in an environment where we're concerned about whether India in its present form will continue to exist with harmony and unity. That's where I'm coming from. I'm not coming in from only an economic perspective. Within that context, I think, given the general spate of bad news we are getting all the time, it's good to hear somebody say that we've made an attempt at eliminating extreme poverty. And I think that's a fair starting point. From whatever I have understood, reading their various documents in the government, they have put out a report, and from public is that they are having a very specific definition of extreme poverty. It is not to be equated with or confused with Antyodaya Anna Yojana, I mean the extreme poor as per that scheme or any other scheme. In fact, I must start the small correction that the scheme that you were referring to, the Ashreya came in 2002. And then in 2016, with some modifications, rechristened as Destitute Free Kerala. And that there's already a clear focus on Destitute Free Kerala, not on eliminating poverty in some comprehensive sense. And then in 2021, the LDF government, by the way, it's not CPIM, it's an LDF government with other parties in it, and they were on board as well. So CPIM have taken the lead. I'm willing to concede that. But I think there are also other partners there. that in 2021 talked about not just destitute-free Kerala, but also a new attempt, the EPEP that you have described. Then, do I have any limit on the time I have? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Have you planned anything?
You have 30 minutes or how much of a time?
That's a lot of time. I think I can cede some of that to Pulapre. He must have more to say.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, but in 2021, when they brought the scheme, they were quite clear that they were not talking about elimination of poverty in general or in some absolute sense. One can always feel poor. Nobody's going to stop you from feeling that, right? No matter, I'm sure some of the richest people in the world feel poor. That's not an issue for us. Now, in this particular 2021 promise that the LDF, the EPEP mission or project, they did have a very specific definition of poverty in that scheme. Apart from the definitional aspects, which one can go into, for me, the most encouraging thing about this process was the involvement of elected local bodies as well as the Grama Sabhas. Now, I come from Tamil Nadu. Okay? Tamil Nadu can make all kinds of claims to having historically had local governance and all that, but I see very little devolution of powers to elected local bodies in my state. I mean, at the national level, one can make sense. I mean, the Tamil Nadu's and Kerala's struggle on the issue of federalism is one on which I'm on their side. But I don't want to provide certificates, for example, to government saying that they are also democratic in their own state. Kerala is a bit of an exception. There is a serious attempt in Kerala, partly because of the political consciousness of the Kerala people, not because of X or Y or Z, that there is an attempt to decentralize power and involve elected local bodies as well as the Grama Sabha, the general population itself, in a participatory process. I was associated, in that sense, I have some association with Kerala over a long term. I was associated with the Total Literacy Campaign of Kerala, which came in the late 80s, which is an inspiration for us in Tamil Nadu to start one there. Then I was also involved with the People's Plan program, not so much in any executive capacity, but in more of a participatory capacity. And then we have now come on to these new efforts that are there. So you go back to the People's Plan and so on. There's a long tradition of people's participation in Kerala, the character of which, when the left is in office, seems to change towards participatory governance rather than protests and movements alone. So there is a long history of protests, and protests are important. Struggles are important. Otherwise, you don't get to where you get to. So the land reform movement, the movement of the oppressed caste in Kerala, these are historic movements that we in Tamil Nadu get inspired by all the time. And we are happy we are not living in other parts of the country where these are not so visible. Having said all that, from 2021 till now, they said, the government of Kerala set itself an objective to try and identify those who, by their definition, would be extremely poor. In fact, the point to note is that Government of India has offered no definition of extreme poverty. There is a definition of extreme poverty that the World Bank toys with, but that also varies across the country's level of development. So the lower development countries have a certain number. You can go from $3 at the bottom to something like $8 for the advanced capitalist countries. So we are really talking about a $3 poverty line, but Government of Kerala is not talking about $3 poverty line. It's talking about specific indicators that constitute, in its opinion, extreme poverty, and which can be measured, identified. The individuals can be identified. Then what impressed me as an outsider, and again, that's why I'm waiting to be educated by Pulapre when his turn comes, is that as an outsider point of view, I found that this was an exciting thing to do. That you have general bodies where people identify in assemblies, people are individually, people identify those who qualify as being in extreme poverty. And that is the starting process for the whole process of identification of the extremely poor. Then the elected local bodies, and then the local government departments come in. There's a fairly detailed process of identifying. And then once you identify this thing, and there was roughly 121,000 households initially. I don't remember the exact numbers. And then ultimately it became 64,006, which is the number being thrown about all the time. And that has about 1.03 lakh persons. So there's some illiterate comments on social media saying, how can there be 1.5 persons in a family? And all this nonsense that probably the right-wing trolls have put up. But for us, it makes sense. As an economist, I can see that Kerala's limited, household size is so small compared to, say, other states. Even Tamil Nadu is a little higher, although it's almost close to Kerala now. This 1.03 lakh persons were individually identified. Their very specific conditions were recorded, and therefore the solutions, quote unquote, there is never a solution forever, but an immediate solution to redressing their extreme poverty status enabled very specific micro-determined interventions. And there were schemes already available. In fact, the destitute scheme will continue. That is nothing to do with the extreme poverty. Sometimes there's a conflation, saying, what about you're living out marginalized households? Similarly, they talk about, marginalized households are covered by other schemes as well, including the tribals. So it doesn't seem like a very proper accusation to say you didn't bring the tribals into it. So this is a very focused scheme only on those who had no means of support to exist and who therefore needed aid from government or from many other source. And in the process, the government managed to find, not through any big generous grants from the union government, which if they were to make such claims, primarily from its own local body government resources, public involvement, and enormous participation by foot and other means of transport by the participants in the process. For me, it reminds me of my literacy days where I would just walk miles to get to a group of non-literates. It just made your day if you could actually sit through a session like that. So I think it's been motivated by a certain degree of idealism. Of course, there's bound to be cynicism in an atmosphere of the kind that we live in, but it is inspiring to find some degree of idealism. And I think on the whole, I don't think they're making fantastic claims. They're saying that this is EPEP 1.0. And we managed to do what we said we'll set out to do. Not perfect, but we've done it adequately. Now we're going to go for EPEP 2.0, where we will see how we can, find out additional, solutions, issues that arise. So I think at the moment, I find many of the criticisms in the media somewhat ill-conceived. I have no doubt that there are weaknesses in the scheme that can be addressed. I'm sure that the Kerala government, and more importantly, the Kerala local bodies, will be addressing it, looking at it carefully. And I think there are enough political parties in Kerala to pounce on you if you don't, which is a good thing about Kerala. It's healthy. In Tamil Nadu, if you make a lot of criticism, the guy will just defect to another party. That's not how it works in Kerala. It might occasionally work like in Kerala, but certainly not with the LDF, I think. So I think we start by saying that a well-defined notion of extreme poverty has been put forward, not necessarily one you and I may agree with, but given that definition, it does not meet, the question has been posed on the panel also, does it meet, there is no international criterion of $3 per household. This is the World Bank. World Bank is not my reference to international threshold. What do I care about the World Bank? Seriously. I mean, honestly, I'm looking at an indigenous approach. The World Bank's $3 is for poor countries, low-income countries. As I said, it goes all the way up to $8. And this dollar criterion, whether it is purchasing power parity or nominal dollars, is always a problematic criterion. If you can identify the individuals, as in this case, extremely poor people who have no means of support, unless the state comes in or some other agency comes in, that definition guides you in how to deal with it. No definition of international poverty lines is necessary here. We're not looking at those international poverty lines or national poverty lines or, all sorts of lines that one can talk about. We are looking specifically at a well-defined notion of extreme poverty in the state of Kerala, primarily guided by the idea that this household and the persons in it have no other means of support and that they need aid from any agency. It could be a non-government agency, it could be a government agency. Ideally, local governments have come forward to participate in this. And of course, people from Kudumbashree have played a very central role in doing a lot of the legwork. And in that, there is a lot of, labor of love as well, I would say, that is involved in this project. So I look at it with a certain degree of sympathy and a certain degree of, inspiration that I draw from it, that I think, yes, it's been a good start. Let's see, let's address the weaknesses and let's go forward. Let's not turn this into another cynical exercise of opposition and ruling party politics. That's where I'd like to stop now.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Athreya. Yeah, absolutely valid. And to be clear, I wasn't the one making those critiques. I was merely quoting the newspapers. But you're absolutely right. There were a lot of newspaper articles and op-eds in the Indian Express and other publications that were perhaps missing certain components of this policy or mistaking what its efforts were actually targeted towards. So thank you so much for sharing those perspectives with us. I particularly enjoyed how you brought up the idea of understanding and defining poverty, because that itself gets awfully contentious, and like you rightly said, it needs to be indigenized and made more context specific. Appreciate your remarks greatly. We now move on to our second expert panelist, Dr. Pulapre Balakrishnan. Dr. Balakrishnan was educated in New Delhi, Madras, and Moscow, following which he read economics at both Oxford and Cambridge universities. He's an applied economist and focuses on macroeconomics and development, and is a widely published economist best known for his books Pricing and Inflation in India, Economic Growth Story in India, History and Prospect, and India's Economy from Nehru to Modi, A Brief History. Dr. Balakrishnan has researched and taught at Oxford University, the Indian Statistical Institute, the IIM in Kozhikode, and Ashoka University. Aside from his university teaching and research, he has also served as a country economist for Ukraine at the World Bank, as the director for the Center for Development Studies in Thiruvananthapuram, a consultant to the International Labour Organization, the Reserve Bank of India, and the United Nations Development Programme. He's been a popular voice in Indian economic discourse for over 3.5 decades, and we're delighted to have him with us today. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Balakrishnan. I believe you have some slides you'd like to show as well. We can try and get them up. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Raunaq, for this introduction. But above all, thank you to Anekdhara for giving me this opportunity to speak at your forum, which I notice has featured a very large number of Indian economists over the past year and a half, or maybe even more. So I'm really grateful to have been invited to speak at this forum. I have a few slides, but before I put them up, I just want to say one or two things. I must say I'm very pleasantly in agreement with the previous speaker, which is Professor Athreya, comment that poverty, there is a certain element of subjectivity in defining poverty. That's a very important point to make. I mean, in particular, for instance, if you it would be a mistake to treat the poverty line as something authoritative. That itself is arbitrary. What prices, etc., etc. So I think that's a nice way to start. Not being apologetic about it, recognizing that there's some subjectivity, and arguing or discussing among ourselves what therefore would be considered a valid description of deprivation. So I'm happy to have started on that note. Now, I also want to say that living in Kerala does not give me any particular advantage or authority to speak about Kerala. I'm sorry, about poverty, because I haven't really studied it in an academic way, but I have some experience because I've lived here off and on for a very long time, and I've done some research work on Kerala's economy, which I'm going to unabashedly flaunt or flog is the more correct word now, in a way that I'll make clear to you. Now, let me also say, partly because of Raunaq's introduction and also Dr. Athreya's very elaborate discussion about the eradication of extreme poverty program in Kerala, I actually have very little to say about this, about that. I mean, after a very cursory introduction, I shall move on to look at something that for want of a better word, votaries of the EEP have referred to, which is Kerala's overall strategy over a long period for poverty eradication, which I think is significant, and especially because the organizers wanted to draw out the lessons of the present outcome in Kerala for the rest of the country. This approach or Kerala's approach to poverty eradication and how Kerala achieved what it did is, I think, a useful problem or aspect to focus on, and that is what my talk is going to be about. Most of you know almost everything about the program as it is from the two speakers who've gone ahead of me. So, Raunaq, I'm going to go straight to the slides. I have 30 slides. Please be patient with me, but I certainly will finish within the half hour. I can assure you, if for any reason I don't finish the slides, I promise to stop you because I don't want to hold you up with my talk for more than I have been allowed to do. So I'm going to go straight to my slides, Raunaq, and I'm going to present them myself as I've agreed with Mrs. Sadiq Ali and Madhu yesterday. And we, in fact, by the way, we tested it and it works quite well. And hopefully it will work well. Let's go directly there. Yeah. So here we are. I made a small mistake. I haven't opened my slides. I need to do that. I'm going to minimize my window. I hope that will not damage anything. No, it doesn't damage anything. Okay, here we are. All right, so give me a second.
Take your time, Dr. Balakrishnan. As Dr. Athreya mentioned, he's generously given you some of his time as well.
Okay, I won't need very long. I don't want to hold up the thing.
After Pulapre is done, maybe I'll have a chance also to add whatever comments I have based on the learning from Pulapre.
That's exactly the plan.
And criticisms, of course. So let's go. I'm going to go straight to my presentation. Here we are. Raunaq, can it be seen?
No, not at the moment.
You share, sir. You share the.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're absolutely right.
At the bottom, you can click the share.
No, of course. How stupid of me. I need to do that. That's what I started doing. And then I realized that I hadn't uploaded these slides. Here you are. I'll get there now.
Yeah.
Yes, it's visible.
Start slideshow, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Give me a sec. All right. Raunaq, does it?
Right, sir.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
So I will move rapidly because I have a few slides. All right. So here we go. So on November 1, as you all know, the anniversary of the formation of the state, the government of Kerala announced that extreme poverty had been eradicated by its programs. Some details may be noted. 4 dimensions of deprivation were adopted, namely food, health, income, and housing. Households facing deprivation in these dimensions were identified. That process has been referred to by the moderator and by the previous speaker quite elaborately. Approximately 60,000 households comprising 1 lakh persons are said to have been lifted out of extreme poverty. These numbers are not entirely irrelevant for reasons that I should make clear as I sum up. The precise nature of the intervention that took place, however, is not apparently by the statement of the government. Questions follow from, at least the statements of the government that I have seen. Questions follow from this lack of clarity. For instance, what exactly would it mean to say that an individual deprived of health has been rendered permanently healthy? More to the point, if Kerala has a good and inclusive public health system as it is, as claimed by the government, why were some persons facing health deprivation at all? An article by the member of the state's planning board, published in the Hindu a few days after the announcement, speaks of palliative care having been provided. Now, palliative care provided by volunteer bodies and by the government, I believe, is a very important part of the Kerala landscape. And I think it's very, very, very valuable. I've no doubt about it, especially for elderly people living on their own. But while it is undoubtedly of value, it does not amount to treatment of the ailment with a view to curing it. Finally, homelessness. Now, homelessness can be ended by providing housing, and good health can be assured by a public health system. Both absolutely important and absolutely central pillars of a welfare state. But it is not a welfare state as we understand it. I want to make that distinction because I will point to something else as I go. Certain redefinitions of welfare that have happened in India made by political parties across the political spectrum. Now, it is not clear how food and income deprivation have been addressed in the eradication of extreme poverty. Is it by food and income transfers? I don't know. That's not clear. Now, the notion of extreme poverty appears to have been borrowed from the World Bank, as Dr. Athreya also mentioned. This by itself, however, is not a criticism. But the World Bank does have a criterion for identifying extreme poverty. It has set the international poverty line for this category at extreme poverty at $2.15 per person per day. The absence of a clear definition of an even quantifiable element of extreme poverty in the eradication of extreme poverty in Kerala, notably income, makes it difficult to assess what the government of Kerala has claimed. A group of social scientists who have a long record of studying Kerala's economy have publicly stated that what the government has achieved is to have ended destitution and not poverty. Only days after the government's announcement on November 1, Mathrubhumi published a photograph of one of two sisters living in abject poverty, implying that the government's claim amounted to baseless propaganda. Now, this is the next bullet point, is the central point that I want to make. I'm not moved either way by the November 1 announcement, I must say. Why? Neither the presence of residual poverty, nor the serious queries asked by scholars, independent scholars, I want to say, on its eradication, need lead to a downplaying of the significant raising of living standards in India that has taken place. A raising of living standards both in relation to its own past and in comparison to the rest of India. This is an achievement or an outcome of very great value on by itself, independent of the 60,000 households who have now been lifted out of extreme poverty. So that's the main point that I want to make. Niti Aayog has estimated that a head count of multidimensional poverty, which is, interestingly enough, broadly the idea of poverty even in the extreme poverty eradication project of Kerala. The Niti Aayog has already estimated that poverty in Kerala was 0.6% in 2021. That is remarkable, right? There's almost no poverty in Kerala, no multidimensional poverty. That's a remarkable outcome. And so therefore, it's not clear to me why the government was compelled to make its announcement, which I don't particularly treat as extremely significant. Much of the hard work has been done earlier, including by this government. For both historians and policymakers, however, there is a real question in how the reduction, this in particular, the headcount reduction headcount of poverty in India was achieved. And this will be my concern here. Now, there are various accounts of how Kerala raised living standards. And there is in it a huge amount that is valuable, that is of relevance to the rest of the country, I want to say. And that's what I'm going to spend some time on. And I want to say that I do find, and I will be quite forthright about it, that the main accounts in the academic accounts or the accounts in the public sphere of how Kerala reduced poverty dramatically, I am a dissenter. I find wanting, and I do believe I provide a very clear and evidence-based account of why I see it as wanting or incomplete, I would say is a better way to put it, and why we should have a more complete explanation. So this would be my concern here. And then I will end with some observations for the rest of the country, because the organizers did mention that. But before proceeding further, note that the burden of an explanation of the reduction in Kerala would be high. It's not a very simple thing to do. The official estimate of income poverty, and which I think is a real one on which you can focus in some ways, in terms of an explanation, or what requires explanation, in Kerala is 60% in 73-74 and 11% in 2011-12. This is by in an article by the by a member of the Kerala State Planning Board in the Hindu on November 4, but it's also public knowledge. These are official estimates of poverty in India and the states by the government of India. And here I want to stop and say that while the present government, the government of Mr. Narendra Modi, publishes data on so many aspects of the economy, there are no official estimates of poverty by the government of India today, at least income poverty, so that we're able to assess the decline in income poverty over a longer time period. Even though now we have a consumption survey in 24-25, which is the basis for poverty estimates, when the government of India does not provide poverty estimates. That's why these dates, that's why the Kerala State Planning Board member could not give you a date after 11-12. It's not that he's arbitrarily chosen those dates. These figures, which I've just put up in the previous bullet point to reduction of poverty on an unprecedented scale. But at the same time, any explanation would have to match up to it. When I say unprecedented scale, I would just say, by comparison, what has been achieved more recently and announced in November 1 is a very small thing compared to this reduction in poverty over long term, which anybody who looks at the numbers would be struck as having been very, very significant. All right. A view now, I just want to say I'm going to present you a view on this. It's important for me to say that I'm giving you that view, which I call the official view. Only because the person who has proposed it is a very, very prominent figure and well-known and a long-term observer of Kerala economy, and whose credentials are very high. He's also close to the government, or rather part of the government, so therefore his view may be taken to be the government's view, and I call the official view, to which and then I provide a view by independent scholars, and then I provide what I believe, what is my own view of the situation. All right. A view on how poverty fell in Kerala over a long period is provided by Thomas Isaac, a former finance minister of state and a well-known economist. As he is a member of the Left Democratic Front, presently in power, it may be treated as the official view. Soon after the government's announcement, he posted on X that the eradication of extreme poverty in Kerala is because of the trade unions, farmers' organizations, and redistributive government policies. These are important, the 3 points that he makes. He went on to state the government would now, the LDF, would now go on to eradicate absolute poverty, presumably by broadly similar means. Now, the context of Dr. Isaac's post needs to be recognized. He was responding to a skeptical account of Kerala's development, and therefore he was obviously a little combative. But it does reflect, his post reflects a widely held view on Kerala's development experience, including what it leaves out. So I would say that his is a partial statement of why poverty fell in India, even if what it proposes were plausible. In Kerala, unlike in many other parts of India, trade unions have indeed ensured that the wage does not fall to unacceptably low levels. That's very important. However, the sectors of the Kerala economy where they, i.e. the trade unions, have been active historically, lost their dynamism decades ago, notably the agricultural sector and manufacturing. I just want to say, as an aside, militant trade unionism in the 60s and 70s may have been a factor in the relocation of industries to other states, interestingly, just across the border to Tamil Nadu, a move which depresses income and lowers employment. Blue-collar workers are less of a presence in Kerala by now, but a constant has been the presence of public sector white-collar unions who are quite powerful. This cohort is small, but as I said, powerful, but in any case geared towards protecting their interests, often at the expense of the public they serve. It could not have had a positive income on incomes elsewhere in the economy, except maybe very, very indirectly, and that is not clear to me. In general, trade unions serve an important role in tempering the excessive capital in their field of production. This is very, very important. And there is no doubt that the capital has become much more powerful in India over the past decade than there have been in the past, while trade unions have become less powerful, and that's not a good thing. But whatever it is, trade unions cannot direct the economy-wide income flows that lie at the heart of growth and therefore the ending of poverty that follows. Farmers' organizations are not unique to in Kerala. More to the point, agriculture has fared poorly in Kerala, with rice production declining for close to half a century, and therefore it is doubtful that their role, i.e. the role of farmers' organization, has been as significant as claimed. Finally, redistribution government as a factor in ending income poverty. A significant redistribution of wealth in the form of agricultural land reforms occurred in the early 1970s. The main beneficiaries were the tenants, with agricultural labor getting very little cultivable land. But laborers did become owners of the land around their dwelling, which would have had the consequence of raising their bargaining power, which they didn't have in the past because they were entirely, what can we say, entirely devoted to or under the thumb of landlords on whose land they had to live. But now they have their own homesteads. More importantly, free labor, who were historically tied to their landlord's estate for employment. This, in a sense, is also Marx's own statement about capitalism is better than feudalism because the labor is free. Though only free to save his or her labor power, but he has that freedom which they didn't have in the past. I should return to this last point about why the land reforms and in what way the land reforms in Kerala were significant. All right, so while there was a one-off redistribution of wealth in the form of land reforms after that, economic policy cannot be said to have been redistributive, in my view. The state has not redistributed income even at a time when it could have, i.e. before GST, when it did have the sales tax and the excise tax. In fact, it has been remarked that tax policy in Kerala has been regressive, relying almost entirely on liquor, fuel, and lotteries, purchased disproportionately by the lower income groups. Kerala's tax GDP ratio is not high in relation to other states, a prerequisite for redistribution. This is probably not very well known. Kerala's tax GDP ratio is not particularly high. It's lowest in southern India and just above the national average. I was a little bit surprised by that. Kerala's economic policy is better described as distributivist, whereby goods and cash are distributed from the budget, rather than redistributive, which involves a transfer of income from the rich to the poor. Now, I'm almost halfway through my presentation, Raunaq. How much time do I have?
I think you still have time, Dr. Balakrishnan. Please,
okay.
Yeah, we'd love to go.
Please tell me. I'm moving on to what I have to say.
Yes, please.
I just want to say, I hope the members of the seminar who are generalists stick with me a little, because some of the discussion is not highly technical, but it's a kind of discourse that economists engage in. But I'm not going to be apologetic because I believe that is necessary. Otherwise, you cannot make a provide a successful explanation. But what I have to say, I want to say, is not difficult at all to comprehend, but it is in the form of an economic analysis. Very basic, but it is.
Absolutely, that's what we require. So this is well appreciated.
Well, thank you for the reassurance. I hope you will not regret it. The distribution of goods and services has been financed by borrowing, leaving in Kerala the state with the highest per capita debt per person per capita. Sorry, I said it. All things considered, the story of Kerala's success in reducing poverty would have to be told in terms of other factors than what the official narrative contains. Now, I'll be very brief and also refer to the fact that there is a discourse conducted by independent scholars in Kerala, not just in Kerala, independent scholars, who also an important point to provide. But I just want to say, while it is valuable, it too, like the official narrative, is incomplete in a way that I hope to show. It does have the advantage of having provided much needed perspective. This body of knowledge, this is another view of the evolution of the Kerala economy, emphasizes the historical roots of raising living standards and thus the reduction of poverty in Kerala. It points to the role of erstwhile princes, Christian missionaries, and social reformers in spreading education, raising self-respect in a caste-ridden society all of which had the consequence of democratizing the polity. Subsequently, the communist movement ended feudal relations of production and agriculture through land reforms. This is my addition, really. I don't think they will have any objection to this being said, but they do have a longer-term view. These impulses led to the gradual shifting of power to historical subjugated groups who in turn demanded both their due in private economic exchange and also public services from the state. The first development raised wages, and the second made the state more responsive. Made the state more responsive in providing the crucial services of health and education. The communist movement, which was to come later than these three forces, gave a fillip to this development. This is unique to Kerala. Communist Party rule elsewhere in Kerala has not had a similar impact. That is very important to stress. They've had an impact, but has not had a similar impact. And that's really worth pondering about. So the nature of a society, I think, is equally important as political processes, political parties, is what I want to emphasize. Anyway, both the official view and that of independent scholars are inadequate as explanations of the decline in
Dr. Balakrishnan, can you hear us? You're frozen. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. We lost you. We lost you for a second, Dr. Balakrishnan.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The service provider is saying your connection is unstable. There's nothing I can do about it.
No, that's all right. Perhaps one suggestion I could make is if you can switch off your video at the moment, it will consume
absolutely.
And then we can resume once the PPT is over. We can resume with the video.
No, you're absolutely right. Now to switch
off,
it's okay. I have to I have to minimize, and I'm very worried about that.
No, sir, this is fine now, sir. You can continue.
It's fine, though. You can. I think
continue,
you can
sir.
Yeah.
No, let me. I think Raunaq is absolutely right.
Raunaq, I've turned mine off. So
no, stop video. Okay.
So others can stop. No problem.
No. Some vanity there, I guess, which needs to be checked anyway. Okay. Both the official view and that of independent scholars are inadequate as explanations of decline in poverty, as they lack an account of how income rose continuously across the economy, resulting in a significant decline in poverty. In the poverty rate. To comprehend this, i.e. this decline in the poverty rate and the continuing rise in income that it implies, we need macroeconomics, i.e. an analysis of the forces active at the economy-wide level. Note that for any economy, while an educated and healthy population is essential, the initiation and the maintenance of a growth process would require a force that generates income at a rate higher than before. In Kerala, this force proved to be what may be termed, or at least I term, the Gulf boom. Following the historic increase in oil revenues of the countries of the Arabian Peninsula starting in 1973, their economies were to boom, generating a demand for labor that could not be met domestically. As there clearly are some people who were born after 1973, I might mention 1973 was the year of the first so-called oil shock in Western language, in the language of the West, that is, i.e. when the oil-producing countries on the Arabian Peninsula raised their oil revenues, oil price very significantly. And this led to a boom in the Arabian Gulf. This because a great amount of dollars, international currency, flowed into their economies. This demand, i.e. the demand for labor, which this boom gave rise to, was for workers across all classes. Mass migration of manual labor to the Gulf for employment from Kerala began. This was followed by income infusion into the Kerala economy in the form of remittances. If you don't understand the word remittances, it just means money which has been sent back to the home from some outside location. In typical Keynesian fashion, these remittances led to an expansion of the Kerala economy. The Gulf boom was to persist for at least 5 decades. As a significant part of the migration was the manual labor, which lowered poverty. Note the difference in this pattern from the migration of highly skilled labor from India to the West, namely of IT professionals who mostly settled there, and therefore do not remit their earnings back in India. This, I believe, has changed very dramatically in the last 2 or 3 years, with remittances from UK and the US and parts of Europe, notably Ireland now, are the largest part of remittances into India by migrant labor from India. Obviously, this is the H-1B visa. The significance of the Gulf boom in Kerala's economic transformation cannot be underestimated. At its peak, it is estimated that remittances amounted to 25% of the state's GDP. A sense of the magnitude involved is seen when we recognize, when we recognize that neither public nor private corporate investment in India come anywhere close to this level today. Private corporate investment in India is about 12% of India's GDP. Remittances were twice that amount. I just want to say that from a economic point of view or macroeconomic point of view, remittances have the same impact on the economy as far as aggregate demand generation is concerned as investment. So that really should tell you about the importance of remittances. There has also been a dark side to the Gulf boom that propelled Kerala's relative prosperity. These are, one, the decline of agriculture, about which I can speak at some length later on because I've worked on this. Unacceptable working conditions for Malayalis abroad, with next to no protection granted to migrant labor, and the bidding up of land prices that made it difficult for those who have not been able to migrate to own a home in Kerala. The upshot of what I have said is that the market, by which I mean both free contracting between individuals, i.e., after all, when you go to the Gulf, you're contracting freely with some employer in the Arabian Gulf, right? And private income flows, of which remittances are the relevant example in the context. The market encompassing both these has had a significant role in the rise of the Kerala economy and the decline in poverty that ensued. In my work, I have shown that the product wage is just an expression for wage by the price of the good concern. And since I'm talking about agriculture, it is the agricultural wage by the price of paddy. The product wage in agriculture grew 6 times in the 25 years from 1973, having remained steady for the previous 12 years. Yeah, going some distance to validate my argument. 1973 was once again the commencement of the boom in the Gulf, and I would say this constitutes a strong evidence for my argument here. Public action, a term popularized by Sen to refer to non-market initiatives that spread literacy and raised social awareness, made it possible for poorer sections of the Kerala population to take advantage of the Gulf boom by migrating there. In the early days of the boom, it was not so easy for poorer populations from other parts of India to make this move. By now, of course, there is a substantial presence of workers from UP in the Gulf countries. But at the same time, it is the remittances that led to the expansion of the economy and raised living standards across the population. The stimulus provided by the Gulf boom lasted for about 4 decades. Its role was reflected in soaring land prices in Kerala, which has abated only recently as global oil prices no longer rose as fast, or no longer rise as fast, I might say. The official narrative on Kerala, which restricts itself to a state provision of health and education and often claims redistribution, tends to ignore the role of the market in the rise of its economy. Recognizing that role helps bring perspective to the announcement of the eradication of extreme poverty earlier this month. The welfare measures very likely undertaken by the government of Kerala over time and now to eradicate extreme poverty are absolutely commendable, as a democracy would not be one without social protection. But the measures themselves cannot address income poverty. It's one of the dimensions identified by the government as constituting its program. This completes what I have to say on the recent announcement of the extreme poverty in Kerala and on the whole issue of eradication or the decline in poverty in Kerala over a very, very long time, which is extremely important and in some ways is the precursor of the reduction in extreme poverty that we now see. I end with some observations on the emerging trend. Now about lessons from the Kerala experience, which your organizers wanted or certainly flagged in their little brief note about what the seminar was about. I end with some observations on an emerging trend in governance in India, what I call welfareism, which I define as the ad hoc distribution of cash or goods, which we have seen across the country from Telangana to Andhra Pradesh to Bihar relatively recently. And of course, has been also part of the experience in Tamil Nadu about a decade and a half ago. If poverty reduction is the goal, the state cannot remain a provider of welfare alone. It needs to be an agent enabling a growth in income and its broader distribution through rising employment. Not just growth in income, but for decline of poverty, this growth in income should be distributed widely, which we are not sure, or rather, I'm not sure is happening in India today. There's reason to believe it is not, right? There's been a great deal of writing about inequality rising in India over the past decade. Of course, it's been rising for about 3 decades, but it's also rising in the past decade. This is a case of there being growth, but the growth not being shared widely. If you want the standard of living to rise, you need the growth to be spread widely across the economy. The challenge this challenge that you have to have both growth in income and distribution broadly across the population. This challenge in the state in Kerala was attenuated due to remittances, or should I use the word relieved? I'm not sure what word I should use, but you know what I mean. This is not an option for India as a whole, because India as a whole cannot have this kind of migration outside India anymore. A welfare provision can address the symptoms of income poverty, but cannot be a cause for raising living standards, which is tied to growing income. The reposition of the state as an agent of welfareism, which we're observing across India's states today, confined to the distribution of goods, can leave a government inattentive to the quality of public service, which are absolutely essential, right? And the reason for that is in the next sentence. It could also weaken public finances and thus the capacity to provide public goods, which only the state can provide. The private sector has no incentive to provide public goods, but public goods are extremely important both for our sense of well-being and for the promotion of growth in an economy, and that's the rising of income. In Kerala, the media recently flagged the case of a doctor pointing to the lack of medical equipment in the government medical college hospital in Thiruvananthapuram, the state capital. Schools without sufficient, this became a very big issue in Kerala because the government came down quite heavily on him. Schools without sufficient toilets and falling hospital buildings have also come to the public's notice in Kerala due to the media. The transfer of goods, cash or goods by government cannot be a substitute for quality publicly provided health, education, and crucial public goods such as infrastructure needed for livelihood. I want to emphasize that. I mean, while parks are absolutely important because the poor have very little spaces of recreation, public infrastructure is also necessary for livelihood. I want to make that very clear. While there are always situations where cash transfer is required, given fiscal constraints, as the case for first building the schools and hospitals, the main pillars of a welfare state. The success of public provision in Kerala should not be overstated. The substantial overstated from the point of view, especially from the point of view of the reduction of poverty, but should also not be overstated, period. The substantial presence of private hospitals in Kerala and the high out-of-pocket expenditure on health of its population point to the far from adequate treatment available in the public ones. The same is true of education. I just want to say, in some of the leading public welfare states of the world, which are really in Europe, I guess, say England and France come to my mind. I don't know enough about Germany. There has historically been, at least over the past 50 years, very little private presence in medicine, and only a small private presence in education, suggesting that the treatment given in the services, the quality of services in the public hospitals and schools was of reasonable standard. I'm afraid this cannot be said about Kerala, judging by the very significant private presence in both these sectors. Now, another disturbing aspect of Kerala's public health system came to light in the form of a voice message to his friend by an auto driver admitted to the Trivandrum Medical College Hospital about 2 months ago, or maybe a month ago. In this audio reported in the press, the citizen narrates the web of corruption whereby to receive any attention from the staff, one has to bribe them. It needs no reminder that the latter, i.e. the staff, are already paid for from the public purse. Finally, evidence of the poor quality of Kerala's higher education sector is seen in the high level of migration to the other states of India, even for undergraduate studies. This issue has reached the state's legislative assembly. I myself was very fortunate to have had a terrific undergraduate education in Madras, as it was called 50 years ago, at some princely sum of 15 rupees a year. This is what public provision can really do. And when it's also of a very high quality, it really cannot be beaten. This migration, i.e. migration of Malayali youth to other universities in the country, other states for higher education, is significant given that the quality of education in the other states of India is not exactly high. But Malayali youth yet reveal a preference to study there over studying at home. Clearly, the much wanted welfare provisions are not enough to keep them back. To conclude, the ending of destitution in Kerala is a matter of some rejoicing, without doubt. But it cannot be seen as addressing the underlying determinants of poverty. So long as the state's economic policy is dominated by welfarism, which I've already defined, and here I'm talking about the lessons from Kerala, I'm not necessarily talking about Kerala, it will remain short of adequately publicly provided services such as health and education, and also a dynamic economy which generates employment and provides the income which is necessary to raise standards of living or the standard of living. I want to say a little bit about Bihar, which has kind of been the poster boy for welfarism only recently. There is a lesson in this for the states of India today that today are far poorer than Kerala. 2 decades of welfarism in Bihar has yet left it the poorest state in the country. The per capita income of Kerala is 4 or 5 times that of the income of Bihar, per capita income of Bihar. And despite the welfare schemes directed at women, the welfare schemes which take the form of cash transfers in Bihar, Bihar remains the state with the lowest female to male labor force participation ratio in the country. By comparison with the national average and with the female to male labor force participation ratio of Himachal, Bihar is just, abysmally low. It's very, unless you take the view that the women of Bihar do not have the same aspirations of women elsewhere in the country, you would not tolerate such a low female to male labor force participation ratio. Ending poverty requires the building of capabilities of a population, which is basically done through health and education provision and providing the public infrastructure for production. I want to emphasize that, for production. A welfare state is an integral part of this, but welfarism of the kind that we are seeing across India today can work against these goals, i.e. the goals of building the capabilities of a population and providing public infrastructure for production. This distinction between the welfare state and welfarism is, I would say, of the essence. The reduction of Kerala is a major achievement, but it needs to be asked if Kerala has done it in the best possible way. Its civil society must debate whether exploiting labor is what it wants to do. Finally, on the government Kerala announcement of the ending of extreme poverty, it must, i.e. civil society, must also ask whether distribution is to be ended by supplying individuals with goods and services or by equipping persons to rely on their own capabilities. So thank you very much for listening to me. Raunaq, I'm back in your hands now.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Balakrishnan. Could I ask you to please end the slideshow and you can switch your camera back on?
I will do that in a second.
Perfect, perfect.
How do I do that now? I just close. I think that should do it. Yeah, it's done it, right? No?
No, the screen share is still on.
Okay.
It's the same button at the bottom where the share option.
Yeah. So I'm there, and what do I do now?
Stop sharing, sir.
There is no stop sharing. I don't see a stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
I'm so sorry.
You might see it at the top of your screen at the center. You might see a red tab that says stop sharing. You see that?
No, I don't. I mean, I see the PowerPoint itself. Can I not close it? That won't do.
Close the PowerPoint, sir. Close the PowerPoint.
Open the Zoom link, sir. Click on the Zoom panel, then you will see it. You have to expand the Zoom thing.
All right.
Then you will see stop sharing.
I am so sorry to be difficult.
Not at all, sir.
No worries.
Now, I am, give me a minute. Let me see you all. I'm now on the Zoom link. Yeah, of course. I have to come. Yep.
Perfect.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Balakrishnan. Those were some fascinating insights, and we really appreciate you taking us through this historical perspective, and as well as building on things that Dr. Athreya mentioned, like detangling destitution from poverty, detangling political claims from the economic realities. These are all incredibly important insights. Before we move on to questions, I'd love for Dr. Athreya to come back in and share some of his thoughts, perhaps points he disagrees with as well as what he agrees with. I'd love to get those perspectives in before we move to Q&A.
Thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed listening to Pulapre as I have in the past, and I hope to in the future. However, I have some specific points to make which might be germane to the debate we're having, or the discussion we're having, this debate. First, I think a lot of information has been put out by the Kerala government. So it's somewhat, if one were to make a claim that there's no information available, that would be disingenuous. The Kerala Institute of Local Administration has put out a lot of the material in public. Similarly, Kerala's Economic Review has put out a lot of data. So people can find time to read it, they'll find it there. On palliative care, you see one can define it in various ways. And so there is a very subjectivity involved in the point that if you take that as a point of debate. I won't go into it further. The photo published by the Mathrubhumi, incidentally, depicted two sisters, Devu and Kalyani from Palakkad. And this used to highlight that the ground reality contradicted Kerala government's declaration. Now it turns out that the only source of income was disability pension received by Devu. This probably made her ineligible for the scheme. So, something like that, something as obvious as that is good. Mathrubhumi is Mathrubhumi. So, I don't have to say anything more about that. It's important not to confuse between poverty and extreme poverty, which happens to all of us when we speak. I want to just highlight some aspects. The share of the income poor in Kerala, as the usual income poor criteria, fell to 12.7% in 1999-2000. That is a bad NSS survey, by the way. There are many issues with it. If you look at
Sorry, I missed that.
The share of the income poor in Kerala,
income poor,
12.7% in 1999-2000. We know the problem with that particular round of NSS. Abhijit has talked about it. And 7.1% in 2011-12. Not 11%. 7.1% in 11-12. Doesn't matter. I mean, I don't set great store by these numbers, but yes. On redistributive policies and their impact on Kerala, the Tendulkar poverty line for 22-23 was rupees 60 per capita per day, and that meant about 1,800 per month, right? Now, the monthly pension paid by the government of Kerala to 62 lakh households was 1,600 rupees per person, which now has been raised to 2,000 per person. Again, this is, you can say state welfareism, but also remember that we have an extremely unequal center-state fiscal dispensation, which has grown worse in recent times, more and more centralized. That's something I'm not discussing here, but yes. So one can't dismiss the anti-poverty effects of government pension schemes, even though one may say that this is not the best way to go about it. We must try and increase output and productivity. All of that I'll be happy to agree with you, but we also have a central government which is not particularly generous, and which appropriates all the direct income taxes to a far greater extent the state can ever hope to, and which arbitrarily provides concessions to the corporate sector, which have impacts on state revenues. So again, I don't want to talk about that. I talked about it earlier in the GST discussion. Now, there is a question about this focus on alcohol and lottery. After the GST, at least, there's not much else for the state government. The 4 items which are there with the state government, all the rest is with the so-called GST Council, which is essentially a creature of the union government. So I'm sure both of us are aware of this. I don't want to go too much into it. Just for clarification, I'm making these points, not in relation to your presentation, just for the clarity of the discussion. Now, it's interesting what you had to say on schools and hospitals, because from Tamil Nadu, we're looking at Kerala's government schools and public hospitals with some respect, because we have a system where people are leaving government schools and going to private schools. Kerala luckily has brought people back into government schools in recent times. And this whole decentralization of educational governance at the school level to local bodies was a good thing. In India, in Tamil Nadu, we are not able to get that through. We're just not able to enforce that. Likewise, you see, generally what happens in Kerala is that people do go to private hospitals. I'm there. I'm also aware that even in Kerala, supposedly a progressive state, there are people who want to time the deliveries, get their physicians to stick to that. So the problems, I'm aware of the problems in Kerala in maternal and child health. But it's also true that in general, people in Kerala go to private hospitals more for tertiary treatment. They do get some primary health care in the government system. So, I think it's correct that ultimately we should be going on to growth of economy and resources therefrom being used to fund all development activities, including human development and other forms of development. At that point, one cannot disagree. But also remember that the state governments, I don't need to tell Pulapre this, state governments are hemmed in a system of center-state relations which is quite unequal. And I think that's something that has to be addressed in a separate discussion. So, it's not like one disagrees. I just want to say that the point about genuine real growth in the long run being the foundation for rise in living standards is well taken. But there's nothing automatic about a rise in growth over a period of time resulting in improvement in living standards. We have enough evidence from other states in India which have done quote unquote well in income growth terms, but haven't done so well in terms of empowering the weaker sections of the population. So I think one must have a bit of a give and take here and essentially reiterate the point that yes, Kerala isn't done yet. There's a long way to go, especially in relation to absolute poverty or in relation to why do we even think of poverty reduction or poverty elimination as an ultimate goal? I mean, if a left movement is leading a state, it should aspire to much more, not just that, a secular reduction in these kinds of deprivations. On that, there can be no question. But I think it's in the Indian context, you see the participatory nature of the program, which is something Kerala people are used to it. Okay, you so maybe coming from Kerala, you don't find anything particularly new about it. For many of us, it was a lesson to watch the whole scheme unfold and get executed in the way it did. As I said, it took me back to my literacy campaign days, Saksharata campaign days at the KSSP, Science Forum's literacy campaign in Tamil Nadu. It took me back to People's Plan and so on. So I think there's a great value. I think at this point in time, I would want to focus on the strengths of the program and of course the limitations as we move on to EPEP 2.0. But among the people, I'd rather foster a sense of hope and optimism rather than a sense of cynicism. I'm sure that Pulapre is not doing it either. So I'm sure that he would agree with me that this is important to generate a certain optimism among the people. The numbers are not too bad either. Kerala's numbers. Yes, I'm glad that Pulapre said that I'm not going to get to this extreme poverty eradication program in terms of numbers. So, and he went on to a much more important analytical historical explanation of what happened in Kerala over several decades. Now, certainly that is not our topic for me today. So I have enjoyed listening to Pulapre on that, and I'm sure I'll factor that into my understanding of the historical background of Kerala. But I also want to make one final point as an activist as well as an academic. Those wonderful, powerful agitations of agricultural workers, peasants, women, so all part of the land reform movement. have left a legacy of democracy in Kerala, which is alive, vibrant, sometimes very badly used, of course, by X, Y, or Z, but in general, this is this is a lesson to states like Tamil Nadu, which otherwise do not have the extraordinarily negative features of some of the North Indian states, but still have very far from being participatory democracies. Kerala, with all the limitations of property ownership and so on, is some distance towards the participatory mode of governance. I think states will find it very difficult to go on funding relief type schemes. We need to fight for a more democratic center state fiscal mechanism than the one we have. In the meantime, we need to keep on empowering people so that they both produce more and also are able to empower their fellow citizens. And if you look at the Gulf issue, for example, you're quite right in pointing out that a lot of revenues came from there. But also it is true that the state had enabled human capability development that enabled them to take advantage of it. And so that those investments in education and healthcare from the beginning were important. I think we would be on the same side of the debate on those things. So have I lost you guys?
No.
What's happened to my screen?
No, we can hear you. We can hear you. We can see you.
Something happened on my screen. I couldn't see. I couldn't see your pleasant face, so I was a little worried.
We're listening intently.
Okay. No, so I think basically many of the points that Pulapre made relate to the longer story on Kerala.
Yeah.
Which is not my intervention today. So going back to the EPEP, I think it's within the limitations of a state government, the very specific set of objectives, it has done well. It is not, Kerala government has nowhere, as far as I know, claimed that they've eliminated poverty. And they can't. And who can they? Even Karl Marx were to come down, he wouldn't be able to eliminate poverty. That's not the issue. They've done something worthwhile. Yeah. There's been something that other state governments can try to emulate. And Kerala has to obviously set the lead for us, even in the new areas that we're talking about. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Athreya. Dr. Balakrishnan, before we go to questions, was there something you specifically wanted to address?
Yeah, only to thank Dr. Athreya for his comments and for taking so much care about responding to almost everything that I said, which I really appreciate. There's just one or two things that I want to respond to, one mainly in the form of clarifications. I agree. I did not have very much to say about the specific forms of the poverty eradication. I believe the Kerala Economic Review, as you mentioned, it was also mentioned in the article in the Hindu. There's also an editorial in the Hindu, does provide information on that. That's interesting. But I just want to say, I repeat that in a sense, in relation to the longer-term decline in poverty in Kerala and the numbers involved, ending destitution without a lack of persons, to me, is not a big story. I mean, the job has been done, including by economic policies. So that is why I kind of see the extreme poverty eradication in perspective. I don't have too much to say about it, and I would say that as far as lessons for the other states are concerned, by borrowing or somehow finding the money or cutting down on essential expenditure, they could do the same, even within fiscal capacity constraints. But the task of raising standard of living across the population is altogether a bigger challenge. And the Kerala experience tells you what that challenge is, and what that challenge is in a line. Now, the point about poverty rate, you're right, but the poverty rates are used are those of a member of the Kerala State Planning Board, which is published in the Hindu. I just thought I'd stick to numbers given by from an official perspective, if you wish, of official body, rather than find my own. And anyway, the reason for giving that is to actually emphasize the dramatic decline over a 45-year period. So that is the point from which point of view. Now, the final and very substantial point of view, pensions, I didn't mention that. I cannot agree with you more. In fact, or rather, I would emphasize that pensions are certainly not welfareism. Pensions are part of any welfare state. In fact, the category social security, if you wish. You would think of the four pillars as I see it, and is broadly understood globally: education, health, housing, and social security. And pensions apart from social security. Any civilized society must have, a decent society must have pensions. There's no question about it. My point was that I'm not sure how much of it is redistribution, because whatever the tax level in Kerala has not been high. Is it because of central constraints or anything else? I don't know. But I just want to say the tax GDP ratio in Kerala is low. That is including indirect taxes. The tax GDP ratio in Kerala, at the time that I commissioned a study, in fact, as a director of the Center for Development Studies, the left front government wanted me to commission a study. I got it done by an independent fiscal economist, a public finance person from the NIPFP. And at that time, which is about 10 years ago, Kerala had the lowest tax GDP ratio among southern states. And even today, it is just about median in India. So my point was about redistribution. How much of this has been done by redistribution, as was claimed in the official view that I provided? Not that pensions are not a good thing. And in my view, pensions are not what I refer to as welfareism. They are, I would think, an essential part of what a decent society or democratic society should aspire to. So that's really it. And finally, I want to say that, yeah, I also want to say two things about the communist movement, and all of it is absolutely important. We've all, the people of my age have lived through it and have seen some of this. There is no doubt, and I think that's a real main contribution. The communists of Kerala have been able to bring about a certain degree of social equality. A term used by Ambedkar, if I'm not mistaken, in his famous last speech to the Constituent Assembly. What was his point? India has political equality, but does it have social and economic inequality? Kerala has more social inequality than probably any other part of the country, including Tamil Nadu, and the communists are to be credited with that completely, right? And just two more points. Local bodies, yeah, I think local bodies are good, and the participation is important. I believe in the decline in poverty, in the raising of living standards over a long time. I'm sorry to say, not so certain that their role is particularly significant. That's my view. But they're important. And again, democracy is also about participation. And local bodies and gram sabhas and etc. are very important things. How well they work in Kerala, I don't know, but as an idea, they're very, very important. But my point was about the reduction of poverty in the long run. That's really about it. And I just want to say, my point was also to bring what I would say, to have a complete Kerala story, to use an expression that the Hindu used when Baba came up with this editorial. And this story, in simple, stark, boring economist terms, a story which would have the state and the market. And I don't think one should have a phobia about the market. By market, one just means free contracting and free income flows. And these have, I believe, been very significant in the raising of living standards in Kerala, as much as these publicly provided health and education in the country, in the state. So that was my overall point that I thought would probably bring a tiny bit of perspective to the whole, if you wish, debate. That word has been used, debate. So that was the point of my presentation.
I like the term Kerala story. Makes a lot of sense. I like the term Kerala story rather than the much more controversial Kerala files that the right wing is so busy pushing.
Kerala story. That's
a good term to use.
That's what the Hindu used in its editorial.
That's story.
That's correct.
To continue.
Yeah.
And I think it's a long process of empowerment, and many things we didn't anticipate that we are learning, right? Across the country, this is one democratic movement that has survived and stayed with the people and grown with all its limitations. And I think that's something that must be factored into any discussion. Unlike, I wouldn't say that about, say, Tamil Nadu or some other state, because I know that our infirmity is far too well.
Tamil Nadu is impressive,
well,
very
relatively.
impressive as an economy, but maybe on the social equality
Relatively
side,
well.
that's a little bit to go.
Yes, relatively well, and they still is. See, even the claims of social justice sometimes ring hollow in the context of the atrocities that take place when
Caste violence in Tamil Nadu.
Yes, exactly. So that worries me.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, I love Tamil Nadu. I live there. Okay. It doesn't mean that I have to agree with Tamil Nadu government and everything, but
absolutely. No, absolutely. I'm happy you raised that because there's a tendency to play that down.
Yeah.
You're right.
Thank you so much for both of these discussions. Actually, in the process of both of your presentations, there were so many questions raised in the chat. And funnily enough, a lot of those ended up being addressed through the course of your discussion. I realize that we have limited time, so I'm going to try and filter down some of these questions. I do want to mention to some of our participants that both our speakers refer to a bunch of sources that were to acquire data and answers to these numerical questions. I realize some of the questions people have asked are very pointed statistical questions asking clarity on particular data points. So I'd please encourage those participants to rewind and just take note of some of these sources that Dr. Balakrishnan and Dr. Athreya mentioned. But coming down to certain important questions, I think one thing both of you highlighted was the particular, like you said, the Kerala story. It's been a interesting and a very unique political economy that has been created, particularly since the 70s, and the creation of a variety of different welfareist policies, as Dr. Balakrishnan mentioned. So in that context, given the almost unique status that Kerala has, and perhaps the very high baseline of poverty alleviation that it already starts with compared to other countries, compared to other states, what do you think are actual practical operational lessons for other states employing poverty alleviation schemes? Or do you think the lessons are more from the perspective of their philosophy and approach for how they must change their style of governance to address these issues? Or is it a combination of the two? This is a question to both of you, and I'm basing this off of some of the questions that the viewers have raised.
Do you want to go first, Pulapre? Yeah. No, if you want to go first, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll come in. Yeah.
All right. So I just want to say, make a small point, Ronak. What is impressive, but I also here want to score a brownie point because it strengthens my argument. In the early 70s, Kerala was a state with no lower poverty than the rest of India.
Okay,
that's significant. And that is the basis. That kind of inspired, if I might say, or triggered is a better way. It's been patronizing to use the word inspired. That triggered a whole line of arguments by Amartya Sen. And Sen's very valid point is, well, here is a state which has low levels of income, and therefore you think has high poverty, but has remarkably high social indicators, longevity, education, the female-male ratio, sex ratio, etc., etc. So now then what is development? High income or high social development? Right. So I just want to correct you. Kerala was not a rich state by any means. And it all happens. It all happens. And once again, it happens with a combination of state intervention in the provision of health and education, and in my view, from the first half of the 1970s, just an incredible source of income being injected into the economy via migration. So I just want to correct. So what about the other states? Well, two things. Absolutely, spending on health and education is very important, which is schools and hospitals. Absolutely. And maybe even governing them probably a little better than Kerala has done to ensure that some of the things that I spoke about, which is in the public domain now about Kerala hospitals, or at least one incident in a Kerala hospital, are not repeated elsewhere. So I think that's very important. But I just want to say that other states may not have the good fortune or the coincidence of something like an external source of demand for its labor, and therefore remittances, which Kerala has in the form of a Gulf boom. That is significant. The macroeconomics of this is important. Where is the income generation coming? What is the source? And so forth. So the states may have to invest much more than they actually do. Public capital formation will have to be high in a variety of ways. Infrastructure, and especially infrastructure with that aids livelihood, I think is very crucial to the whole story. So I'd stop.
I'm sure Pulapre would agree with me that the tax GDP ratio before and after GST are not comparable. Clearly,
what before and after?
The tax to state domestic product ratio.
So when I did no, but correct.
No, that's fine. I mean,
this study that I referred to is before GST. Before GST. But I just want to say one thing. But Dr. Athreya, after GST, all the states would be equally.
Absolutely.
So therefore,
but for the other states, it didn't matter, you see.
So therefore, that's not a relevant point. Yeah.
Tamil Nadu also relies on it. I'm aware of that. Now, the other point I want to make is that, of course, we have always treated, you said pensions are legitimate, and we actually see pensions as a right, historically, Then the other one, the point I want to make was that local bodies, the process of identification of those eligible for the EPEP was only possible because of a very participatory nature of the process. That you had these Gram Sabhas, you had these local bodies, and you had a process by which, including the Kudumbashree staff, you were able to identify. So I think for me, the main takeaway from Kerala, sitting here in Tamil Nadu, is we need a far more vibrant local democracy in Tamil Nadu than we currently have. And I don't think you're going to disagree with that. Okay, so I will leave it there, I think. Yeah, thank you.
One other set of questions that people have asked is, and something both of you alluded to in terms of understanding and perhaps in some cases disassociating what it takes to address issues of poverty or economic deprivation, as well as other issues such as social inclusion and leaving behind certain historically marginalized communities. So I was just curious to get both of your thoughts on when creating these kind of policies that are particularly addressed towards addressing poverty, how do you account for things like social inequality? How do you underline the issue of socioeconomic deprivation that have been dictated by historical marginalization? And how would you contextualize that in the case of Kerala and looking forward?
Pulapre should probably respond on the Kerala's case. I'll come back to him.
All right, so whatever I know. I would say that providing, if one part of social inequality is differential capabilities, one part of it. There's also cultural capital. I'm ignoring that. There is capabilities. If that is so, it is absolutely essential that publicly provided schooling is as good as anything else in any other educational initiative of the state. Why? Because only then you set the capabilities of the historically marginalized to come on par with that of everybody else, which is part of the reason, which is an important part of the social inequality. I said that that's a material manifestation of social inequality. So I just want to say that somehow this slightly, in my view, sentimental and very damaging view that these are public institutions or public schools, government schools, this is good enough, is completely wrong. And we should spend much, much more on schooling than we do now. And maybe I have no particular problem if higher education is to some extent funded by fees. I just want to say India, I don't know about Kerala, India is the country where the ratio of spending on universities per capita in relation to spending on schools is the highest in the world by far. So schooling, I think, is where it all happens, and capabilities developed in schools is really what matters most. Other aspects of social inequality, I think you need social movements. And there the communists are to be credited very greatly with what they have achieved as far as social inequality. The transition from a society where the kind of caste aristocracy ruled because of land ownership to one where that distinction is completely obliterated is due to the communists. But having said that, have capabilities been equalized in the state? No. That's because the left parties are slightly welfarist. They take on too much, instead of spending much more on schools and education, and also governing them. How can you have the kind of situation sent out by a patient by audio, which is covered in the press, that you need to make side payments in the Medical College Hospital of Trivandrum if you want to get any attention in the ICU? I'm shocked. And I think Kerala discourse should widen to much, much more than public provision of welfare and the 1930s, etc., to what it is happening now. So that's what I would say. So one, I think, once again, public provision and best quality schooling is what does it. And I just want to complete, I'm sorry, by saying this, there were many other parts of the world where there was huge social inequality. Britain was one. In about 20 years after the Second World War, social class differences were almost entirely obliterated because you had an effective welfare state, because university education for those who could not afford was 100% funded, and the capabilities of the historically deprived were as good as that of anybody else. In fact, the aristocracy was shown up as having no capabilities whatsoever. They still had land, which matters, but socially they were no longer important. I'm not sure the welfare provision in Kerala has gone that far. Of course, in the rest of the country, it's got so much more to go. I'll stop there.
Yeah, the only point I want to add is that it was not just public provisioning of schooling, but the fact that the process of supervision, control, monitoring, empowerment of these local schools was in the hands of local bodies. And that is not easy, because the organized unions were generally in state like Tamil Nadu have a problem with that. And we have had to look at both sides on that. But in Kerala, in the recent period, especially post-COVID, the enormous inflow of students into local body monitored public school, private, not in the private sense, but genuinely government-owned schools, has been impressive. And I think that states like Tamil Nadu need to draw from that and try and decentralize the governance of schooling and give it to genuinely elected democratic bodies. And we have a long way to go in Tamil Nadu on that, but I think that's a strength of Kerala that must not go unnoticed. But it's not perfect by any means, but it's certainly much better than what we have elsewhere. One. The other point I want to make was, in the course of this presentation, Pulapre did mention about market and state. At least the LDF, if anything, can be accused of, by the left critics, so-called, often accused of pandering to the market. You see, far from being rigid and saying everything has to be done by the state. I think they've taken a leaf out of experiences elsewhere in the world and taken a realistic stand on what the state can do and what other agencies can do in the process of development. I think we are getting somewhere through our collective experience to a better place. That's the optimistic note on which I'd like to leave this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're nearly out of time. So I want to thank both of you. Sorry, Dr. Balakrishnan, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I thought I saw at least one message from Madhu, and I certainly haven't answered that. And
sure,
then, and if he still hasn't, I'm perfectly happy to try and answer
please,
that.
Please, Madhu sir, was there a particular question you had? You're muted right now.
So I was just referring to the discussion on welfareism, and I was just trying to view the Oxfam report on inequality, which is increased drastically. The Oxfam report says that this the top 1% owning 40% of the wealth and bottom 50%. What would welfarism also contribute to this, or is it fundamentally our policy which has led to this? How would you look at this thing?
See, now, I would say that it can be nobody's argument that welfarism has contributed to this situation. But welfarism, as opposed to a welfare state, which provides the highest, I also want to put this caveat in, the highest quality of health and education to the entire population free is, I believe, a prerequisite for even dealing with inequality. And the inequality you also address by taxing the rich. In fact, you would need to, because you need to fund your education, right? You fund your school. So that, again, while hardly perfect, we have some indication of how all this has been managed in the rest of the world, where a serious effort has been made to have a welfare state. So yeah, so welfarism has not contributed to the inequality. But on the other hand, if you keep having welfarism, then you can probably never get rid of inequality, because the capabilities of the population are so different. The poor have such poor health and education endowments because they have not been, they don't have the capacity to endow themselves. Only the state can do that. Therefore, you want to be careful about how you spend whatever little money you have. You don't want to spread it too thin, in my view. I just want to say, apart from that, I want to say, by the way, let me just tell you, Madhu, some I might lapse into my JNU avatar in a way that you might not imagine. Don't think it is very, not you, I don't think people should think of welfarism as being the cutting edge of radicalism. The king of welfare is Narendra Modi.
Well, cash for votes.
Yeah, exactly. So far be it to say that giving out money from the public purse is a very radical stance. The radical stance is to endow the population of the now deprived population with capabilities of the highest class or the highest order. And that's probably what they want. You see, so I just want to say, by the way, also things like PM Kisan are highly unequal. Giving 6,000 rupees a year, which by the way is not very much, but giving to people who just have titles to property, but do not engage in any agricultural activity, while not giving any money to agricultural laborers. It's extremely inequitous. It's a wrong thing to do. So I think the left in particular should be careful about challenging every critique of welfarism. Welfarism is not necessarily very good for the poor. They're not asking. And by the way, are they asking for small sums of money, or are they asking for very good schools and hospitals for their children and for their parents? I think it's the latter.
Yeah. Can I respond to a question that Madhu has?
But the political parties who are manufacturing concept on this, by saying this, all handing out money is a good thing. Labh arti, humne aapko ye diye, wo diye. You're not asking for cash.
Dr. Balakrishnan, I think
can I come in?
I had a response to make. Yes, please, Dr. Athreya.
Yeah, basically, I was looking at Madhu's question. So there's one question where he's asked about the stats, about the amount spent on health, housing, and subsidies to the 60,000 households. That's about 1,000 crores. Madhu, that's roughly, it's there in the report, the detailed report that the government of Kerala has put out on the net and on the website. So roughly about 1,000 crores is what has come from the state, but a lot of local body resources in terms of people working on this, in terms of Kurumbashri workers and so on, all that implicit non-cash valued kind inputs are also there, but 6,000 crores is the amount that we're talking about, which is very small. But we must also count all the contributions of the people who were part of this process. But I think at the end of the day, we agree that development means much more than some scheme or the other. And secondly, we agree that decentralization and participatory democracy are worthwhile values. Yeah. And in this, we learn from Kerala. Right. Thank you.
Thank you to both our speakers. This was an incredibly engaging discussion. I just to point out a couple of things. Dr. Balakrishnan, you mentioned at the start that you don't want to get too technical or give too much like pure economic analysis, I will say, as someone who is a generalist, like you pointed out, who attends a lot of webinars and panels, walking away with concepts to look up afterwards are the best kind of panels. So you've left. That's why we look to specialists such as yourself and Dr. Acharya Dr. Athreya, to share all of these specialist ideas and concepts. I think there's a lot that both of you agreed on as well. What struck me was the tone with which you perhaps disagreed despite agreeing on substance, which really made me think that Dr. Balakrishnan is currently sitting in Kerala, and therefore, while he agrees a lot, his tone is more like, I expected this. Whereas Dr. Athreya is someone who's sitting in Tamil Nadu, who's again agreeing on a lot of things, but being more celebratory because I guess he wants more from his own state government. So the tone and tenor of how you approached with things that you inevitably agreed with is what really struck me as very interesting. But you've left us with so much to consider. Like, I mean, how we understand and define poverty, how we see it as deprivation, and how we see the role of the government to create both conditions to alleviate these deprivations as well as improve capability. I think all of the context on Kerala specifically and how it applies or doesn't apply to other parts are extremely important. And lastly, I think you both spoke incredibly well on detangling this or untangling these political claims and these short news bite statements from what are long-term complex concepts and efforts that need to be studied in more detail and understood better by us. So cannot thank you enough for this deep dive into what we've seen and how we must understand it. So thank you again so much to both of you for taking out the time today. We really appreciate it. I know I have a lot more to learn on this, and thank you for pointing me and everyone else in the right direction. And thanks again to all of our viewers who tuned in, as well as viewers who'll hopefully watch this after the fact as well. And I'll hand it over to Madhu, sir.
I just have an announcement to make. Thank you for the participants, all the participants who logged in and the subscribers of Anekdhara. Our next webinar will be on the 28th of December, and this will be on the hidden curriculum, textbooks and political agenda. We have two speakers who kindly agreed to speak. That is Professor Aditya Mukherjee, former historian from JNU, and Professor Peter Ronald D'Souza, who was earlier director in Institute of a political scientist. So both of them will be there. We will, of course, share the details with everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anekdhara, for a lovely day and a lot of interactions and such a lovely team. Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Good to see you, Pulapre, after so long. Looking good.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Sir, shall I end the live streaming?
Yeah, please. I'm exiting.
Sir,
No, sir. Only.
Can we exit?
Yeah, no, live streaming ended.